I'd estimate it was after about 3 hours of playtime when RUINSMAGUS really clicked for me. I found a few spells I liked, started working in more consumables, remembered enemy weak points, and generally went from a tepid explorer hiding behind a shield to an ice-cold battle mage, tossing back health potions and dashing back and forth between enemy attacks. Developed by Character Bank and published jointly by Character Bank and Mastiff, RUINSMAGUS is a VR action dungeon crawler with color, charm, lots of personality, and a soundtrack that really has no right being as good as it is. Almost from the get-go, RUINSMAGUS establishes and sustains a fun-loving atmosphere, one where you're fighting ancient guardians one moment, and the next you're sipping drinks with some anime friends. You are a magus, a dungeon-diving mage investigating ancient ruins beneath the city of Grand Amnes. These mysterious ruins house powerful and dangerous enemies, but also Odo, a valuable commodity and the source of Grand Amnes' wealth. To other characters, though, the ruins represent different things. They're a misunderstood home or a respite from the oppressive social norms of the outside world. To a few, the ruins are destiny. RUINSMAGUS does a solid job expanding out from the idea of its ruins as a place that's dark, mysterious, and hostile to one that's more nuanced, meaningful, and thoughtful. It's not always elegantly written, and the narrative leans pretty heavily on exposition dumps to advance major character moments. But by giving its characters deeper motivations and principles, RUINSMAGUS kept me interested in what they had to say and what their actions meant to the world at large. Currently, RUINSMAGUS doesn't have an English voiceover, and there are some translation issues. RUINSMAGUS was developed in Japan and at some point launched a campaign on Campfire, a Japanese crowdfunding platform similar to Kickstarter. Whether some of its shaky translation was budget-based or not, I'm not sure. Regardless, RUINSMAGUS mistranslations never sour what is some really delightful storytelling, and it's not difficult to pick up on some of the heavier themes that surround the ruins. The political and societal ramifications of a world with a very important and rare resource that is also dangerous to mine are illustrated in both RUINSMAGUS' main narrative and sprinkled throughout its world, whether you're speaking with a stuffy noble or reading a newspaper. Metaphor aside, RUINSMAGUS, through its characters and dialogue, crafts an atmosphere that's friendly and engaging. Its characters are charismatic and ridiculously likable, brought to life in fun, creative cutscenes that look fantastic in VR. Production quality tends to be spotty and somewhat inconsistent. When transitioning between scenes, RUINSMAGUS fades to black a lot, sometimes disrupting a nice flow of emotion. During dialogue sequences, it's not uncommon to see characters simply blink in and out of existence. A few characters' facial expressions are well made and great to watch, especially up close, but other characters are given a more minimalistic treatment, a stylization I found limiting. Where RUINSMAGUS gameplay and art direction really shines, though, is combat. Magical projectiles, both from you and enemies, vary pretty widely in size, shape, color, and speed. Depending on your strategy, combat could be slow and methodical as you cast spells behind a sturdy shield. Or maybe you carry a light shield and dash your way around a fight, making combat feel much closer to a VR bullet hell. RUINSMAGUS has a fairly simple setup that, as new abilities and equipment get introduced, becomes just complex enough to keep you experimenting and trying new things all through about a 10 to 15 hour runtime. You've got your shield on one hand and a spell casting gauntlet on the other, both of which can be upgraded. Your shield has all your HUD, like health, shield strength, and equipped items. Keeping the HUD here was a great immersive choice, leaving your vision clean and focus on the projectiles that'll be flying your way. Your gauntlet only has so many charges before it needs to reload, done by pressing the grip and trigger together, and spells need to charge to get to full strength. Again, the only HUD here is what's on your person. Vials tell you when to reload, and spells flash and make sounds when they're fully charged. Most enemy attacks can be blocked by your shield as long as it's not recharging from taking too many hits. Pressing the grip button, though, will deflect attacks back at enemies, barring you get the timing right. This also means you can swing your shield around and deflect attacks that aren't headed at you, adding plenty of fun opportunities for improvisation. When all this is thrown together, dashing, deflecting, reloading, casting spells, and moving your shield around, RUINSMAGUS turns what can look like chaos into beautiful, smooth combat. It's active, intense, and precise. Flawlessly clearing a room of guardians and reloading your gauntlet's charges afterward is extremely satisfying. For those those with different preferences or more susceptible to motion sickness, RUINSMAGUS does offer standard teleportation movement and options to turn the camera smoothly or at intervals, as many VR games have. I used normal thumbstick movement in my playthrough, and I felt like that's how the combat was intended. A playthrough with teleportation may be more comfortable, but I'm not sure the experience would be as smooth and seamless. Items like health potions, buffs, and grenades add a few folds to combat, and RUINSMAGUS will pit you against enemy groups and bosses that make all these buffs and health potions useful, especially in the later levels. It can be a little inconvenient to have to cycle through a list, especially once you have a bunch of items to swap between. It's nice that the UI is tied to an in-game item, but having some kind of alternative way to cycle through and grab consumables would probably make the process a little easier. Without a doubt, the highlight of RUINSMAGUS design is its boss fights. Combined with its already fantastic soundtrack, the animations behind boss movements and attacks are absolutely gorgeous. When you're faced with an enemy that has a big health bar, prepare for an absolute light show. Bosses are each pretty distinct, and they have different attacks and special abilities that may take an attempt or two to figure out. I really enjoyed that aspect, but I could also see other players not liking it as much. To complete a level, you only have 3 lives. There are checkpoints that'll save your progress, but lose those lives and you'll have to restart from the top. It's definitely disheartening to lose progress, especially if you make it to a boss and find out that the spells you've equipped really aren't great to take that specific boss on. But failure is an opportunity to reevaluate your approach. Enemy attacks in general, not just bosses, are diverse enough that certain playstyles and spells may not always be as useful as others. I was switching equipment and playstyles all the way until the end of the game, but not out of frustration or uncomfortability. Instead, I was having a lot of fun experimenting, trying out new abilities, and figuring out how best to deal with new kinds of enemy attacks. However, while new enemy attacks keep combat fresh, enemies themselves and the layouts of dungeons stay pretty much the same, which leads to things getting a little stale. You'll see new color schemes and lighting, but you'll also begin to quickly recognize the orientation and layout of ruins the further you get. From beginning to end, combat stays fantastic, but there's little else to find in these ruins, which is too bad because it feels like the kind of space ripe for secret doors and hidden chambers. With the exception of bosses, it doesn't take long until you've seen most of what RUINSMAGUS is going to throw at you. Even with the short runtime, its dungeons do become repetitive. This gets really noticeable around RUINSMAGUS' latter third, as storylines start to stretch and things drag on. RUINSMAGUS takes its time telling its stories, which I enjoyed and appreciated, but it seemed unable to progress plot lines without you having to clear a couple dungeons. RUINSMAGUS takes advantage of VR as a medium and uses it to create energetic combat and tell a story in a creative and fulfilling way. It isn't always elegant, it can feel clumsy, and it may leave you wishing its narrative were a little more coherent, but its excellent combat and unabashedly cheerful tone make it a lot of fun to play.